Okay, Geeta Dhyana. Om. Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. And the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, last few instructions from Lord Krishna. After sharing the entirety of the teaching, the question will relate to how well we're able to listen. Because if we listen, if we're able to listen well, and of course that's our big challenge, just being straightforward, that's our big challenge. Because we're holding on to so much stuff, so many ideas and belief systems and such that are not serving us, that are not allowing us to be present, fully present in the moment, that it's so hard to listen. When we think that we're listening, we're really hearing our own stuff. And so that's the big challenge. And that's why, in India, devotees will read the Bhagavad Gita over and over again. And what we find is each time we read it, something else comes. That's the beauty of it. Something else comes, some clarity on something else, and the ability to let go of something else and to find more of the glory of the simple life, the real life. So these instructions we had read and discussed a little bit yesterday. We'll pick up here, 67. This is never to be spoken by thee to one who is devoid of austerities or devotion, nor to one who does not render service or who does not desire to listen, nor to one who wrangles at me. And the why is really simple and straightforward because it won't go anywhere. And he gives, if you turn it around, he gives lots of opportunity. So he says, the one who has some austerity, who actually has some practice of self-control, or who has some devotion to something higher than themselves, not just the mundane. One who is willing to render service, who serves, who offers themselves in community even, like this. Or one who comes to you and genuinely wants to hear about your sadhana and the benefits of sadhana, who genuinely wants to hear. Or one who does not wrangle, or who has an interest in that which is higher, a genuine interest in that which is higher. So, and he says, if none of those exist, please don't. Because it won't go anywhere beneficial, and it'll just raise more doubts for you, and you'll end up in an argument, and it's a no-win situation.
Here, Yashoda.
But then, the one with supreme devotion to me will teach this supreme secret to my devotees, shall doubtless come to me. Yoga teacher training. is really about this. And the one who shares from a place of devotion to that which is higher. Lord Krishna says, shall doubtless come to me. Nor is there any among mankind who does dearer service to me, the Absolute, nor shall there be another on earth dearer to me than such a one. So the one who shares the Dharma, who lives the Dharma and shares the Dharma. Swamiji had some lovely commentary. He says, the message of the Bhagavad Gita will not produce a lasting impression upon the mind of one who has no devotion. He is given to sense indulgent, who is given to sense indulgence, who is selfish or atheistic. We had a little conversation even about the atheistic. Doesn't mean that there's not an opening. What we call atheistic today may simply be not believing in a person as a supreme entity, and that there's some wisdom in that. Because often the Abrahamic teachings in particular will although in Islam it's more clear, to be honest, even though people end up getting worshipped. Because in Islam it is pointing to a supreme, not a person. Christianity is doing the same, but it can be easily misunderstood that this person, only this person, is God. And so if one says, I don't believe in that, there's some wisdom there. And so even then, people might say, I don't believe in God because I don't believe in that. And so there may still be a big opening, and maybe more of an opening than, he says, hence, if one with these qualifications comes to you to discuss the Gita without these qualifications, that is, who's completely self-centered, who doesn't have any interest in higher, he says, keep quiet. In a public meeting, your words are received eagerly by the devout. In private conversation, give the knowledge only to those who are faithful, eager to learn, unselfish, and full of devotion to God. So just practically speaking, if we're in a public group and we're asked, it's fine. Share from the heart. Don't go beyond what you actually have some understanding of or know or have some feeling of devotion to. But in a public group, there will be some who will receive the seed. But in private, really focus on the one who has a genuine interest, who really is prepared. A little preparation. Spreading the knowledge of the Gita itself can build an inner fortress of divinity. This beautiful commentary, beautiful insight he shares here. Spreading the knowledge of the Gita itself can build an inner fortress of divinity into which we can retire when assailed by temptations, and an outer fortress too, inasmuch as worldly-minded people will not bother us, and we shall have excellent company of the devout all the time. You see, at some point, if you really dive deep within yourself, there's a good portion of society that will see you as crazy and won't want anything to do with you whatsoever. And that will be okay. Not against anyone, but that will be okay. That will be okay. And here, actually, he says, even they who at first think we are mad will in God's good time get the infection themselves and be happy that they are mad too, mad for God. Swami Premananda used to laugh and say, Mad Fools Club. He would share some of the wisdom in satsang, And people would look at him like, and he'd say, Mad Fools Club. In other words, he wasn't changing his allegiance just because people thought he was crazy. And of course, after being with him for a while, it was a craziness that I wanted to inject myself with. So, okay, a few more instructions, and then a question, and then he asks the question. And he who will study this sacred scripture, sacred dialogue of ours, by him I shall have been worshipped by the sacrifice of wisdom. Such is my conviction. Called the wisdom sacrifice. It's an interesting concept. Sacrifice is an offering. But sacrifice is also a receiving. Well, we don't start that way. In sacrifice, the spirit of sacrifice is just giving. But you can't give without receiving. And so right? It's just that in our worldly way of dealing with things, we do in order to get. But if you do in order to give, you'll still receive.
More so.
And it's much better that way. And so the wisdom sacrifice is, the concept of it is, sacrifice your limited knowledge at the altar. Offer it. In other words, allow yourself to be open and to receive. And what you let go of is replaced by deeper knowing, by wisdom. And so it's called the wisdom sacrifice in that way. It's where you give yourself to God and God gives himself to you. Like this. So, and that study, the introspection, the real study, and the doing our best to, when we get something, to put it in practice, to live it, doing our best to do that. That's this wisdom sacrifice. And then he says, finally, the one who hears this full of faith and free from malice, he too, liberated, shall attain to the happy worlds of those of righteous deeds. Oh, no, Shiva. Morning, Del. Mama! Swamiji adds this commentary. Jnana yagna, which is sacrifice through wisdom, is a form of worship. He says it's worshiping God as the light of knowledge. The Gita is God's word uttered by his lips. In days of yore, fire was produced by rubbing two pieces of wood together. The divine fire of the Gita has been produced by the rubbing together of the two lips of the Lord. It is of the Lord. It is he himself. A lamp lit from another is a lamp too. Jnana, and the sacrifice word is yagna. Jnana, wisdom, yagna, is dissemination of spiritual knowledge, which was dear to our master too. You study the Gita with others, you are benefited and so are they. Krishna uses a symbolism that was familiar to Arjuna, yagna, in which a priest surrounded by devotees offered clarified butter into the sacred fire. And jnana yagna, the article offered is wisdom. The priest does not create clarified butter. The lecturer does not create wisdom. If the fire is dull, the clarified butter will augment it, but if it's dead, it's wasted. The audience, the group, the Sangha is the fire here. If it's eager, though not wise, the discourse will augment the wisdom in the members. But if the audience is totally disinterested, then the wisdom falls on deaf ears. It's wasted. And he says, then hearing is the first part of Jnana Yoga, which we were just talking about. Hearing is the first part of it. It's said that there are 3 steps, and the steps are repeated in terms of learning the highest knowledge. And the steps are Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana in Sanskrit. And the translation is straightforward. Listen is the first. And so we have to be prepared to listen in order to listen. So listening, Manana is contemplation. We all have so many. Our lives have been full of challenge and grace. And we have so many examples within us that we have the ability to draw on in order to see if the teaching resonates or not. So manana is contemplation. It's rolling it around in the mind, considering it. Not just repeating it like a mantra, but actually being contemplative with it. Does this make sense? Do I have an example of this? Have I seen it? We were doing this manana, for example, when we were talking about action and who's really acting. And we were using the motherhood example. And that's manana. Because those are things you have experience with. You have the ability to touch your own experiences and contemplate, consider. And then nididhyasana means putting it in practice. And you take what you get out of it and really live it, do your best to live it, and then repeat like that. But it has to start with listening. If we can't listen, if we're still so full of ourselves that we can't hear, then the simplest things, it's so wonderful. Okay, finally, 72. Yeah. 72. Here's the question. Lord Krishna asks, has this been heard, O Arjuna, with one pointed mind? Has the delusion of thine ignorance been destroyed, O Dhanamjaya? And we'll see what Dhanamjaya translates to. Conqueror of something. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, for sure, but Dhanam, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it's trans. You know what? Here, let's answer the question right now. Swami Shivananda will give us the answer. '72. No. He translates all of the word for word. I'm going to give it to you. So here's the word for word translation. Whether this heard, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, by thee one-pointed by mind, whether the delusion of ignorance has been destroyed, thy, O Dhananjaya. Okay. Okay. We'll use Google Swami a little later and see.
It's probably one of the names of Arjuna.
Well, it's the name he's calling him.
Yeah.
The question that was coming is, what does Dhananjaya mean? So he calls him, O destroyer of foes. He calls him lots of things. Yeah. So, okay. He calls him son of Kunti. That's what he called him right there. All right, we'll set that aside for a moment. Has this been heard, O Arjuna, with one pointed mind? Does that make sense? The key is one pointed mind, and has this been heard? Again, usually our mind is so active trying to listen that it's not one-pointed, and we're experiencing disturbances as well, so not one-pointed. And the key is going to be one-pointed. And so it doesn't mean that there's no benefit to listening if the mind isn't one-pointed. But he's very specific about asking that question because it's one-pointed mind that liberates us. One-pointed mind is meditation. That's the definition of meditation. It is sama, as in samadhi. It's when the mind is finally one-pointed. What does that mean? Well, practically, when only God is seen. It's fine. You can see the forms, but you recognize what they are. You're not disturbed by them. So there's a single underlying reality here. There's only one. And the one interpenetrates everything. And everything is of it. And we're so accustomed to a way of seeing and relating to everything as if we were separate from it and it was separate from us and everything here was separate and had its own identity and its own life, and that was the highest reality of it. We're accustomed to that. But that changes. The more you practice seeing the depth, seeing what's really here, then the more you open. And at some point, you don't see things in the same old way. At some point, the association between the objects that you see or smell or taste or touch and the stories about them, at some point that association collapses. And that's not the primary mental activity anymore. And so one-pointed, seeing the truth, knowing the truth, no matter what happens, that's one-pointed mind. So that's the question that Arjuna is being asked. Have you heard me with one-pointed mind? So it's not just have you heard me. It's have you heard me clearly? Have you heard me completely, fully? Have you heard me in your heart? Have you heard me all of the way? That's the question he asks. And Arjuna answers, he says, destroyed is my delusion as I have gained my memory. And the word he's using is memory, could also be said to be knowledge. But memory is helpful. Through thy grace, O Krishna, I am firm, my doubts are gone, and I will act according to thy word. Firmness also is intellect, vivek. Early on in the Gita, we had the concept of many-branched and endless are the thoughts of the irresolute mind. In other words, everything leads to something else. Many-branched, like a tree. And endless. When we look at the life that we might have lived or might still be living to a great extent, where there are material goals and we have to have them for our happiness, we have to achieve them for our happiness, then what we see is nothing ever does it. And so that process, many branched, because there are many different objects, and endless. There's no end to it because there's no satisfaction from it. And so that's the first part of that shloka. The one who is firm sees only one choice, not millions of choices or hundreds of choices. Sees only one choice. And that choice is the light or the shadow. We can say it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, multimedia.
Perfect. Chima.
Jema.
Oh.
So
When you say the light or the shadow, what is the shadow part of?
everything is shadow. The light is the light. Just like the hologram, just for a moment, just like the hologram is only made of light. But if you meditate instead of on the light, on the shadow,
Okay.
then many branched and endless. Huh?
Gotcha.
Meditation on it is an endless process. And seeing that hologram instead of the light is suffering.
So what about when people say that they're doing like shadow work?
That really is related to the saying. Generally speaking, people put their own meanings in everything.
Like the Jungian shadow, right?
Yeah.
Talking about when they're talking about like this unconscious part of ourselves that people are doing shadow work to like improve themselves. They're like, oh, so I'm kind of wondering how that falls into this. Or
We
if
could-
it does.
Where it would be consistent is if somebody's working on eliminating the tendencies that are born of the ego-centered nature.
Okay.
So shadow work being, in that way, working to root out tendencies that are not serving.
Oh.
And of course, really, the only way to do shadow work would have to be to come to the light.
Yeah, because if you're just going in the shadow without shining the light on
Yeah.
it,
But I think that concept is one that everybody has their own understanding of.
yeah.
And so it's not really a universally grounded principle. Oh.
Swamiji.
Oh.
I really appreciate the word memory being used right there instead of knowledge,
Yeah.
in that memory it's always been there, just an uncovering, a remembering of something that already is known.
A simple example of that, just a very simple example of that, is there are ways. Tao has knowledge now that he will forget as life becomes more complicated and more gross. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's not that it's not still there. He still remembers his time in the astral realm, and in a way, he's trying to make sense of it here.
Yeah, it's like when he was newborn, he was really like emanating like this, I think Case called it the God energy. It was just
Yeah.
just so beautiful and pure.
Oh.
And that's already changed a lot.
Right. And so, but he has to do what he came to do. But then what he forgets, he's going to want to remember. And it's not about just recapturing that, it's about an integrated end that comes. But yeah, memory, same. Swami Shivananda is translating it also as memory. But then he puts in parentheses knowledge, remembering knowledge as in like that. Oh. Okay, so Arjuna says, destroyed is my delusion, I have gained my memory through thy grace, O Krishna, I am firm. Speaking of conscious mind, intellect, I'm firm. I've made my choice and I'm sticking with it. No matter what comes, no matter what I experience on the battlefield, I'm sticking with it. This is what he's saying. Yeah. So I get it now. And he closes by saying, and I will act according to thy word. So free will. Free will. Even though we're not the doer, we have the power to choose with this intellect. We have the power to choose. Can we choose the fruit? Well, we can try. We can try to choose so much, but we can't choose the direction. We can't choose what we devote to. That's an absolute choice. We were discussing yesterday, what do we place on the altar? And the altar really is our works. There's an altar. I love the concept that Peace Pilgram shares about this body. She says it's the temple. So this body is the place where the altar is. And temple of the soul, yeah. It's the place where we come and we worship. And what do we worship? Well, there again, it's just two choices. We worship the ego sense, or we worship the absolute delight. And of course, God bless us, because really this ego sense is so loud that it's hard not to take it as the only truth. Mm-hmm. Even though the conscience is here, we'll often experience that what we hear from the conscience doesn't make sense from the perspective of the ego. Why would I do that? What will I get from it? And so, but the truth is, we worship one or the other. It doesn't make us bad, but it does cause us to suffer. So, firm. And then we'll close. There are 5 remaining sutras, and now that's the end of the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. And of course, really the dialogue goes on forever, because the dialogue is happening within each and every one of us. But for the story of the Bhagavad Gita, that's the end. Those are the last words. When Arjuna says that, then the battle starts. And oh my God, when we watched the Western movie Mahabharata, which is about 5 hours, the Peter
Block?
No, the name will come, but it's okay. And Arjuna in the battlefield is a whirlwind. So much happens in the battlefield. His son is killed. I mean, so much. But I have no doubt that he remained single-pointed and remained firm in the process. And we say, no matter what happens. I mean, the moment that you say, okay, I'm firm, what happens?
Everything that can make you unfirm
will come.
Right to you.
Right. You'll be given the opportunity to see if you're really firm.
Not yet.
So, yeah. But I will be. Or, it wasn't worth it. Okay. So here's where we close now. Sanjaya said, so this whole dialogue has been we're brought back to the beginning, because Sanjaya was given a special power. Sanjaya is an administrator. He's an assistant of the king, the blind king. And Sanjaya was given a special power to see and to hear experientially the entirety of this discussion of the Gita. And so he actually repeated it to the king because the king wanted to know about it. So now we come back to that. Sanjaya said, "Thus I have heard this wonderful dialogue between Krishna and the high-souled Arjuna, which causes the hair to stand on end." So it says Sanjaya was not a disinterested observer. "Through the grace of Vyasa, I have heard this supreme and most secret yoga direct from Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, himself declaring it. O King, remembering this wonderful and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I rejoice again and again. And remembering again and again also that most wonderful form of Hari, Krishna, not Hare, Hari. Yeah, I know, very confusing. But great is my wonder, O King, and I rejoice again and again. And the last sloka, 78. Wherever there is Krishna, where is Krishna? Wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, wherever there is Arjuna, the archer, and where is Arjuna? And wherever there is the intellect and the interest in what Krishna has to say. Wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, wherever there is Arjuna, the archer, there are prosperity, victory, happiness, and firm policy. That is my conviction. So wherever this dialogue plays out, and wherever one comes to understand and comes to live in the light, then there are prosperity, victory, happiness, and firm policy. Such is my conviction. I'll read we'll close with Swamiji's commentary on this last. He says, this simple verse has attained the high status of being regarded as Gita in one verse. Yet on the face of it, it does not seem to contain the least portion of the Gita's message. Moreover, the conditioned prerequisite is frighteningly impossible. Krishna and Arjuna lived thousands of years ago. Maybe what Sanjaya said applied then. How does it help us now? The answer is, look within. Let your whole soul become Arjuna, the seeker. Mentally repeat the famous verse in the 2nd chapter. Lord, I seek refuge at thy feet. I am thy disciple. Instruct me. But you should also be an archer, Arjuna. The Kathopanishad compares the self, little self, with the arrow in relation to Brahman, the absolute, the target. Om is the bow. String the bow by the utterance of Om. Fix thyself on it firmly. With intense concentration of mind, let the arrow, yourself, fly towards the Supreme Being, who is the self of yourself. Then you are the true archer. When you seek God thus, you shall discover him within the innermost chambers of your being. He who is dark to the worldly man's eyes will shine as the light of lights for you, as if 1,000 suns arose simultaneously. There within you, you will see both Krishna and Arjuna once again, as they have always been, together as one. This is self-realization. This is the goal of all human life. This is the truth which all the scriptures point out. In self-realization alone, there is true prosperity and victory. For so-called worldly prosperity is adversity only, leading you away from the goal. In self-realization alone is there everlasting happiness. All else is non-happiness. In self-realization alone is there firm justice. Only the sage of self-realization is established in truth. May you reach this goal in this very birth, nay, here and now, as my master used to say. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, we close the 18th and the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, in the Upanishad of the glorious Bhagavad Gita, the science of the eternal, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna ends the 18th discourse entitled The Yoga of Liberation by Renunciation. Hari Om Tat Sat. Any comments, questions? Hari, please check the monitor. See if we have anything.
so it is. What a wonderful journey we have been on.
Oh, that is Elle Van Apps, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Oh. She's been with us since the beginning as well. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay. That blessing from Swami Shivananda is a real blessing. May you reach in this birth, verily, here and now. Here and now. Okay, we'll close with final prayers and arati. I'm laughing. It's at this moment, the day that Swami Premananda Ji Maharaj completed the study of Yoga Vasishta. Now that was 3 years instead of just 10 months. That he uttered the words right now, and they just came inside. These same words just came inside. Pakora. Does anybody even know what pakora is? Swami does, because I've eaten it. But we don't have anyone that knows how to prepare it. So how did that come? Pakora is the Indian delicacy, fried vegetables, like French fried veggies.
So maybe Mataji has to come to make it.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Let me tell her and see what she says.
We'll tell her that today. We'll see her today.
Yeah.
Here today.
Well, we'll have you all over for pakora. She says yes.
Mataji, what time is your flight?
Okay, page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashanto Makashit Dukhabhat Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki,
Jai.
and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions.
Jai.
Okay, let's rise for Arati. Venkatesananda, Shankataharena, Sitarama, Radhe Shama, Jai Jai Arati, Gauri Manohara, Gauri Manohara, Bhavani Shankara, Sambhasada Shiva, Goma Maheshwara, Jai Jai Arati, Raja Rajeshwari, Raja Rajeshwari, Tripura Sundari, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, Mahakali, Mahashakti, Jai Jai Arati Anjaneya, Anjaneya, Hanumanta, Jai Jai Arati Datatreya, Datatreya, Trimurti Atara, Jai Jai Arati Adityaya, Adityaya, Bhaskaraya, Jai Jai Arati Sanishwaraya, Sanishwaraya, Bhaskaraya, Jai Jai Arati Shankaracharya, Shankaracharya, Advaita Grave, Jai Jai Arati Satgurunatha, Satgurunatha, Shivananda, Jai Jai Arati Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Vishnu Devananda, Jai Jai Arati Agastya Munaye, Agastya Munaye, Shivama Priyane, Jai Jai Arati Ayappa Swami, Ayappa Swami, Dharma Shastare, Jai Jai Arati Jesus Gurave, Moses Gurave, Buddha Gurave, Jai Jai Arati Muhammad Gurave, Guru Nanak Gurave, Samasta Guruvyo Namaha, Jai Jai Arati Venugopala, Om Nisakri Sriyovati Nasankritaratam, Nema Vidyo Vanti Kucho Yamani, Twameva Vandam Garbati, Sarvam Tashdivasa Sarvimam Divati, Om Namaste Chayamane Sarva, Godavari Saraswati, Narmade Sindhukarari, Namastudio Namo Namaha. Tvameva Matra, Chapitra Tvameva, Tvameva Bandhushka Sakha, Tvameva, Tvameva Vidyam, Dravidam Tvameva, Tvameva Sarvam, Mama Deva Deva, Kayena Vasha, Manasendriyarva, Buddhyatmanava, Prakrita Swabhava, Karodhyadya, Sakalam Harismai, Narayanaye, Tisarvarpayami Sarvam Dharma Prechacha Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarvapapabhyo Moksha Ishami Ma Sukha.